Good evening. I'm Kelly Wright. Thanks for joining me as we spend this next hour together. As always, you know it, I do sincerely hope that you are safe and well, taking care of yourself and your family because you really do matter, especially in these troubling times we find ourselves living in. So today we're going to talk about a lot of different things politically that's going on in our country and how it affects the way forward, healing the soul of America. We'll talk about the fractures and fissures within the Republican Party. We will also talk about Joe Biden's plan to get that stimulus package out. He's meeting with Republicans today who are trying to get him to compromise. And of course, we'll continue to talk about equity, the fact that he's trying to end systemic racism in this country. Is he doing enough? And then tonight, we have Academy Award winning actor Louis Gossett Jr. He's in the house tonight to reflect on a woman who has a great legacy. His close friend, Cicely Tyson. He'll be with us tonight as well. But first, we get things started with my good friends who are here to divvy things up politically and give us some sense of where we are as a nation and how we move forward. I'm joined by Dr. Avis Jones-DeWeaver, political strategist and media consultant, also attorneys Mark Harris and Timothy Allen Simon. Good of you to join us tonight. Always love having you guys on. So look, the first things first, we got to talk about the elephant in the room. Donald Trump is still wielding power. Even in the act of an insurrection and an impeachment coming up, a trial for him, he is still wielding power to the point that Kevin McCarthy travels to Mar-a-Lago to actually broker deals with him so he can move forward. I got to ask you, what do you think about Donald Trump still having power over the Republican Party? Dr. Avis.
I feel like I'm living in a horror movie where you think that the that the monster is dead, but he's still alive. I mean, this is exactly what's going on right now, and you're exactly right. In my estimation, the Republican Party has completely lost itself to this person. He is still calling the shots. He still has Republicans scared and shaking in their boots, afraid to stand up for what's right. Or maybe they just believe what he believes. But the problem is that he is still, as you mentioned, wielding power, even though he is no longer in office. And so that has created a situation where you have all sorts of wackos now leading the party. The insane asylum is in charge. The insane people are in charge of the insane asylum. And nobody wins in that situation besides those who are seeking just raw power and who supports them. But for the bulk of Americans, this means very, very, very bad news.
Mark, do you find it troubling? I mean, 74 million people did vote for Donald Trump, and they're still supporting him, it would appear. And they're not coming out in a very bold way to say what happened on January 6th, that terrorist attack on the United States Capitol, was wrong, and he should be punished for that.
I'm very troubled. I'm troubled by the 74 million and the others who don't fit into that number. There was probably more support for him that is not counted within the 74 million. He got 74 million votes, but he may be sadly more popular than that with some. You know, this is the time to call some folks out. I think that the Republican Party needs to be called out. I think it was ridiculous that the congressman from California, the House Minority Leader, would go to Donald Trump like he was the president in exile or something. What the heck is this? In addition to that, we have the madness of Marjorie Taylor Greene, including her liking, if you will, on social media, comments that others have made calling for the assassination of Nancy Pelosi and others. This is madness. I think one group, you talked about the elephant in the room, I think one group that's a part of this as well that is accountable for some of this is the evangelical, so-called right-wing Christians who are embracing this crazy, erratic behavior. So, you know, we have a lot to deal with, but we have to call the main thing, that Donald Trump, the legacy of Donald Trump continues, and it should be called out.
Timothy, what say you?
Well, one, you know, I worked with Kevin McCarthy when I was in the Schwarzenegger administration at the time he was in the California Assembly. And at that time, while conservative, he actually was a rational and I thought effective legislator. He became radicalized, as most of the party has become, or a significant portion of the party has become what we call radicalized by Donald Trump. But if you really look at the trend of the Republican Party, really since the Southern strategy of Richard Nixon, it's been moving further to the white and the right for a number of years. Yes, there were Black Republicans like myself who were trying to push it back, but in fact, that was a very strong momentum. What you have today is the group, the Marjorie Taylor Greens, that you have the group that used to be left in a room in the back at a party, okay? But then they let them in. Then they started doing the Cupid Shuffle with everybody. Then they started buying drinks, and then they became the DJ, and now they're running the party to a large extent. And those who try to stand up against them will be primaried by Donald Trump. I also want to say, just in final, that it's not uncommon for former presidents to still have influence over the party. Barack Obama was the largest draw during the Biden administration. Bill Clinton was a very large draw during the Obama campaign. So it's not after, matters were settled between he and Hillary. So it's really not that uncommon, and we shouldn't be shocked that a former president, leader of the free world, commander in chief, still leads his party.
Yeah, I understand. The only reason why I bring up that it's shocking is because of what happened, what transpired with him questioning the validity of this election, and then moving forward to incite an insurrection. And now he's been impeached and facing a trial. This is the second time that he's been impeached. Look, let's take a break. When we come back, we've got to talk about what Joe Biden is trying to do with the stimulus package, something that's very important. Republicans are trying to broker a deal with him on a bipartisan approach. We'll talk about that and more next. Welcome back to the program. I'm joined by my good friends, Dr. Avis Jones-DeWeaver, as well as attorneys Mark Harris and Timothy Allen Simon. Dr. Avis, Joe Biden has been trying to push this $1.9 trillion stimulus package. Now, he says he's open to a bipartisan plan and wants to have a bipartisan plan. The Republicans are now offering him something, at least 10 Republicans are offering something that's substantially lower, providing about $1,000 to the American people and about $618 billion as opposed to the $1.9 trillion that Joe Biden is asking for. So what do you is there compromise here?
I'm hoping that President Biden understands that he has a mandate. And I really wish that people would stop focusing so much on the 73, 74, perhaps million people that voted for Trump and focus more on the 80 plus million people that voted for this administration, and specifically voted for this administration because the other administration clearly didn't give a damn about whether or not they lived or died. We are in a crisis moment here, both in terms of our health with regards to the vaccine dissemination, but also with regards to our economy. And when you have a distressed situation in an economy, you put money in the hands of people who need it and who need to spend it in order to survive. That in and of itself is a stimulus, right? It stimulates the economy. So the smart thing to do right now is to give money and put money in the hands of those people who are in need, sitting in food lines, for example, right now. Lastly, I would say the last people that I really want to take economic cues from is this Republican Party. These are the individuals who had no problem with, in essence, spending like a drunken sailor. When we look at what they did with regards to tax cuts for the wealthiest of Americans, that led to record levels of a deficit in this country. So clearly what we're seeing here is the hypocritical nature of a party that has no problem with making sure that the wealthy get even wealthier, but will do everything they can in their power to make sure that those individuals who are in need don't get their needs met, and those who are really at the verge of not having their health taken care of. Remember, this is the same party that tried to kill the healthcare plan too, don't get those issues addressed either. So for me, this is a Biden administration that won with a mandate. Have the meeting, absolutely. But we're not going to have them running the train. This is a Biden administration, and they should have the last say.
Mark, what do you think?
I don't know. I mean, the bottom line is I don't know if Biden's plan is the best plan. I don't know if these so-called Republicans who've offered their compromise are the best plan. I think that sometimes what we tend to do is say, I like Biden, I like the Democrats, so therefore I'm going to support the $1.2 trillion, 1.9 trillion, whatever the number is planned. I think we ought to be peeling back the elements of what this is to see where the substance is. I think that one of the things that Dr. Avis talked about before is we ought to not be, as Democrats, so worried about conciliation and cooperation. We have 50 votes plus one on the tie break. Let's go. If we in fact think that the Biden plan is the correct plan, we serve a cup of coffee and a nice warm tea to those Republicans who want to come by, and we tell them goodbye. And we go in there and we hold firm and we vote those 50 votes and let Vice President Harris break the tie. I don't even understand why this is that big an issue.
Well, the 10 members of the Senate that have offered the $6 billion package are being characterized as the compromisers, but in essence, they're really, I believe, engaging in obstructionist government. They're following the lead in many cases, not all, of a discredited former president who still feels that, I understand his defense in his impeachment will be that he actually won the election and it was flawed. The Democrats need to become more aggressive, shoot one across the bow, and make it very clear that there's a new sheriff in town. I don't think this is the time for compromise. I think it's the time for a budget reconciliation and or lifting the filibuster and getting the money into the hands of the American people. Period. End of story. It's not something, yes, we do debate as a legislative body, but in fact, there are people in desperate need in this country. And if the Republicans really wanted to show one modicum of integrity, they would say, okay, Mr. President, we're going to give you this one because we took that tax break that Dr. Avis referenced. We're going to give you this one, and let's work on other legislation going forward where there is probably more room for compromise. Not why people are dying, starving, right, and out of work. That money is needed to stimulate the worst recession, arguably a depression, in our lifetime. There's no room for debate.
Very good. We'll take a break. When we come back, let's talk about equity. Can it happen? That's next. Welcome back to the program again with my good friends, Dr. Avis Jones DeWeaver, attorneys Mark Harris and Timothy Allen Simon. Last week, as you know, President Biden started unveiling a lot of executive orders. One of the most important ones, was dealing with equity in terms of environmental justice, equity in terms of race relations, ending systemic racism. This week, he's dealing with immigration. Dr. Avis, is this what you wanted to see President Biden do? Finally start dealing with systemic racial issues and putting it in the form of executive orders to at least start moving the ball forward to heal the soul of America?
Well, it's a start, but it's not enough. So we still need to put pressure on him to actually push legislation through Congress that will be more permanent in nature in terms of what the after effects will be. I would love to see, for example, the Voting Rights Act be one of the top things that he tackles. And that's because, and it's not just because it's very important to Black people and our voting rights, because it is, but also just in terms of he was being strategic politically. If he wants to have a chance of maintaining a majority in Congress past the midterms, he needs to make sure that the Black vote is protected. And right now, it's already been attacked with what's going on in Georgia and what's going on in Arizona, with laws that are being introduced that would make it that much more difficult either for people to vote, or even more outrageous in Arizona, the ability for the actual state legislature to basically overturn the votes of people. It's absolutely ridiculous. So, the Voting Rights Act needs to be a top priority that needs to be pushed through Congress as a law. I would love to see him take action with pushing through another law that was similar to the Justice and Policing Act that was in the previous Congress that would address issues having to do with police violence. And finally, I would love to see more specific focus that would, once again, be legislatively focused on economic changes that can be made, stimulus that can be provided that are targeted to our areas, urban communities, places where Black people are disproportionately the number of those in the population. So I think these executive orders are quick, They are something that can be done. They show that there is a priority there. There are things that needed to happen really quickly that I'm glad that he did. The Muslim ban reversal, for example, getting rid of that ridiculous 1776 commission, for example. But when we're talking about more substantive, long-standing changes that another president can't come in and at a stroke of a pen overwhelmingly undo really quickly, we need laws. And I would love to see a focus on that while he still has the political capital to get some of these hard things through Congress.
Yeah, Timothy, we do need to get to the law, but you work in, and many times you've worked in the energy sector. That environmental justice component, that's very serious, especially how it impacts Black and brown communities.
It's very serious, but I'm not in full agreement with some of the Biden administration decisions, including ending or revoking the permit of the XL pipeline. Canada is our neighbor, our friend. They're one of our biggest trading partners. Their women and men have died in our wars. So I think it's a mixed bag, but I do support the effort of equity in every aspect of American government. I think historically we have compartmentalized civil rights, human rights into one specific area of government, typically around the Congressional Black Caucus. I do like the fact that the Biden administration is saying, no, we all own this and we're all going to be a part of it. While he has the bully pulpit, it is really up to Congress to push these laws. That's where Chuck Schumer comes in. That's where Nancy Pelosi comes in, and their ability to flip vulnerable Republicans in purple areas of whom we need their support, as well as Democrats in areas that can sway either way. In comes Jamie Harrison, proven to be an amazing fundraiser. And yes, we're knocking on the door of the midterms. That is the type of strategy I believe needs to be embraced.
Mark, where do you see it?
Got to have equity before you have equality. This country is very big on talking about equality. But when you start off 50 yards behind in a 100-yard race, or in this day and time, 50 meters behind in a 100-meter race, and then everyone talks about being equal from there, that's where African Americans have been relative to this country since its inception. So I agree with you, Kelly. We've got to have equity. This president speaking equity and having his executive orders reflect that is a good start. But I also agree with what Timothy just said. Congress is the one that ultimately is going to make these decisions permanent. If there is an effort towards equity and or equality, it's Congress that's going to make that happen. President Biden is doing what he can relative to executive orders. I'm glad to see it. Fortunately or unfortunately, as we go from administration to administration now, you've got flapjacks flipping in terms of executive orders. One president moves one forward, another one takes it away. And that is the nature of the executive order authority. As you know, a president can revoke it him or herself, or the next subsequent president can revoke it. So permanence is what I'm looking for. And I hope that Congress will follow through and make this quest for equity a permanent one.
Well, I want to thank you all. And what you're saying really comes back to what Dr. Avis was saying, get it into a law. But thank you, all three of you, Dr. Avis Jones de Weaver, attorneys Mark Harrison, Timothy Allen Simon. And when we return, we'll take a look at the life and legacy of Cicely Tyson through the eyes of her close friend, Louis Gossett Jr. That's next.